So being an empath, I believe an empath to be the highest level being that has chosen to be a human, right? Because all the clarios, all the psychic abilities, all the high level sensitivity is rolled up into being an empath, right? And you know, as a healer, a clairvoyant looks, right? So a person that's reading is only looking. An empath can truly be you. Stepping into that conversation with someone as an evolved empath, right? We're always going to figure things out easier if they're about us. So if we step into another man's shoes, we're going to be able to have a different perception of their life than if we're just looking at it from the outside. Yeah. Yeah. Evolved enough and have earned that. That is an earned in the spiritual world. Well, not in our current spiritual world, but in true spirit, being an empath is earned. It is developing the clarios and the energy medicine and the ability to read and the ability to hear others' thoughts and to have energy come out of our hands. That is an empath. They are the highest evolved being here. And they suffer, right? And they feel trapped in that. And that's unfortunate, right? Because this information they're bringing in, they're making it about themselves, right? If I sat here with a person that was constantly thinking about wanting to die, as an unconscious empath, I might walk away thinking I want to die. And maybe, you know, that has nothing to do with me. And I'm not being a healer if I make everything about me, right? So it becomes very important for an empath, right, to be very conscious of how they feel before they move into situations, you know, before they're involved in things that are difficult, right? So an empath is highly sensitive. They absorb or can, if they're not careful, absorb other people's emotions, right? These empaths have lost the ability to mirror. They've lost the ability to mirror because it's become a very self-absorbed, self-indulgent, right? Victimized space, right? Many are introverted because of that absorption. I mean, for myself, like if I were to go to a concert, which I love to do, right? If I walk through the crowd, right? Like my body's going to react to everybody's emotions in there if I'm not conscious. And I'm not choosing before I go in to be solid and contained within my own energies, right? That is a skill that's learned, right? Now, empaths, very, you know, without having ever experienced trauma, right? They need a lot of alone time, right? Again, they are highly evolved beings. So alone time is hard for beings that are not evolved. Nature is very powerful for empaths, right? Now, it is interesting that in this slide, I have this, and I find it interesting, right? Because it says it anywhere you read about empaths that they're targeted by energy vampires. I don't believe that. I believe that empaths are always looking for a ground wire. They're often replenished in nature, right? So courting, you'll hear a lot of people talk about courting and vampires, and what's real and true is an empath is always reaching out, right? They're always reaching out. So their energies are always scanning the environment, right? So instead of energy vampires being around them and sucking their energy, they have to realize that they are actually reaching out and sucking off other people's energy, right? Like a fairy to, quote, heal them for a moment. That's unconscious healer work, right? That we're constantly taking the edge off of people, right? And they're not doing that, we are. We're responsible for that, and we have the authority to not do that. Yeah. Now, often these folks end up with these labels like hypochondriac, phobias, like they become housebound, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia. They have huge emotional outbursts, because you have to realize that, like we said earlier, that the narcissist and the empath unconsciously dance together very often, because, you know, the empath's fear is so large, the narcissist can get in. Right now, the thing with an empath is, if you're standing in front of someone that's having an emotional outburst, an empath's gonna draw that energy and meet them, right? If we're not careful. So they have these huge emotional outbursts, right? And it's often, quote, very unlike that in their natural life. Does that make sense? You have to realize, if you're an empath and you've got a person raging on you and you absorb energy, your anger is going to be coupled with their anger, right? So we have to recognize that.
Yeah.
Often they struggle in social settings or to participate in crowds, right? And they easily get startled as well, right? So again, being highly sensitive is a part of being this evolved empath, right? So creating strategy for people around their superpowers is different than telling them what they shouldn't be doing, right? Like, a lot of my people don't like the grocery store. I'm like, hey, Instacart's a great thing. Order your groceries, they'll bring them to your door and you don't have to go to the grocery store. Fair enough. There's a lot of people on the planet that don't like to do things and don't do them. It doesn't have to be that there's something wrong with you that you order your groceries. You know what I mean? Does it make sense?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Showering can be a weird thing too for highly sensitive people, right? Because the initial hit of the water and the temperature change and everything can be, and the scents of, you know, the shampoos and the soaps and having foreign things on your body, those things can be big deals for highly sensitive people. So, you know, stepping in and getting them to trust you enough to tell you these idiosyncrasies is, you know, that's where a lot of the big work is done. Yeah. In creating clarity for that. So this empath is highly sensitive. They're highly intuitive on top of everything else. And they still haven't had trauma yet. Right? So we have to recognize. Right? So mental illness, I don't believe in it. I think it's very rare that a child is born with their brain broken. And if so, we're going to know that right up front. Yeah. And the rest is trauma and reactions to it. And, you know, the level of sensitivity with which they, you know, endured the trauma, right? That becomes the candy for us, right? My brain loves puzzles. So those are places where, you know, those intuitive detective skills really, you know, are advantageous. You know, I think this is all a level of know, because even in the indigenous, some of that is being lost, you know, and, you know, in our world, even, you know, 50 years ago, you know, we talk about that. I mean, many even of the Christian faiths had a sect that believed in the level of sensitivity and the psychic abilities for healing. Yeah. So, you know, we've recently, oddly, feel like we've tamped it down and watered it down all at the same time. Because right now, you know, everybody and their brother is a quote psychic, and that's not true. Like I said, I had somebody over recently that was like, you know, I was talking, she was like, I'm channeling. I'm like, you know what? I'm like, okay, let's see what she says. And what came out on the other side was regurgitation of my own words. And it was like, oh, that's not channeling, right? You know, so I think in our arrogance and our trying to be something, we often use these words that are inappropriate for what's happening. Now, another thing, right, like is these folks have been searching for normal. And they're not, right? Everything they are, every moment, every session is, I just want to be normal. And, you know, normal is nothing but average or below. So we must recognize that, right? Normal is nothing but average or below. And, you know, they're not average or below. They're extraordinarily gifted beings, right? So chasing normal has them chasing something that is beneath them. It is beneath them. Yeah. So questions to ask oneself, right? These are how we're gonna maneuver these situations, right? This is the universal internet. So if a person, right, once we get them reclaiming their body every day, right? They're setting up their field every day. And they're doing a body scan to know, like, okay, this is what I feel like today. This is me. This is how I'm entering the world. I don't have any anxiety. My body's very calm. It's very clear. My mind is very clear. I go out into the world. I go to Target, and suddenly I have this overwhelming rush of emotion. Right? Is this mine? Yes or no? Right? If the word is yes, then you're like, okay, I'm out of my element right now. What knocked me off balance? And where is my integrity right now at this moment, right? If the answer is no, it's not yours, then you're like, okay, am I meant to affect that then? Yes or no? Right? If you're not meant to affect it, you walk by. You're not the healer that is going to change life for that person. You may just water it down, right? You're not here to help every person. That doesn't mean you're not going to know that a lot of other people need help. Yeah, but you're not God, right?
Yeah.
So am I meant to affect it, right? And the ego has to be out of the way, right? And, you know, oftentimes we're eavesdropping and it's none of our business or none of our information. And the answer is no. You're not going to walk up to Target to a person and give them a healing, right? Like, they're not going to receive that well. Now, if you hear yes, I may walk over and start up a conversation and see what they bring me. See if the door is open to effect, right? That is us using our body as a receiver and being a mirror rather than a sponge. Yeah.